Hello everyone, thank you for joining in today's IT Service Management webinar. The topic for today will be aligning ISO 25000 software with CMMI for development. Today with me, we will be joining with Mr. Orlando Olumide Odejide, the PCB trainer and the training manager of Training Heights Limited, a PCB partner. Orlando has an extensive experience in enterprise architecture, and he will be discussing with you today how can the new standard ISO 25000 be aligned with CMMI for a better software quality in each organization. Please ask your questions. You can write them at the right-hand control panel, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute your microphone. So without further ado, we will continue. Please, Orlando, you may start the presentation. Thank you.
All right, Tim, can you hear me clearly though?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, all right, so good morning, everybody. Once again, my name is Orlando, and I will be running through this webinar with you over the next 40-45 minutes, speaking about ISO 25000 and CMMI and the alignment between the standard and the best practice methodology called CMMI. All right, good. So I'll just go right at it. So if you have a question, what you can do is to send the question to me. As I said, you can raise up your hand and I can attend to it. Okay, it's quite a bit of slides that I have in here, so I'm going to try to be a bit quick just to be able to go through most of them. Are we good? All right, thank you. So if you look at the two, ISO 25000 is actually not a standard, it's a series of standards, because there are about 14 different standards that are all included in ISO 25000. So I will go through that later, and I will also go into the 22 core process areas that are involved with CMMI. Okay, so it's first and foremost, it's all about should I say more efficient and effective software and better software projects, because of course. Well, I was thinking about, sorry about that. The more efficient and effective software and better software projects, because of course you don't get software except you learn software project. So the ISO 25000 and the CMMI methodology, both of them, the real objective is just for us to be able to have much better software projects and be in a position to deliver much better software for all our stakeholders. So these two methodologies are extremely important and essential, and this is what they are about. So we're going to explore what does ISO 25000, what does it have to offer? What does CMMI also have to offer? CMMI means capability maturity model for software. So what does that have to offer also? And how can an organization align both 25,000 and CMMI to be able to generate excellent benefits for their business? So that is what we need to look at, and that's what it is that we truly need to understand within the context of this webinar. Okay, so what exactly, I mean, I've been doing a lot of ISOs and best practice methodologies for years, and I found that just like most ISOs are derived or developed from different best practice. So if you look at an ISO like ISO 20000, it's come out of ITIL as a methodology, as a best practice. So it's the same for ISO 25000. ISO 25000 is using the best of what CMMI has to offer.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Orlando. Can you please just move on the side, the control panel from Go to Webinar, so attendees can view the full slide of the presentation? Yeah,
okay,
that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. So, as I said, the 25,000 series leverages the best of CMMI and adds a couple of other methodologies to enhance it. So, but CMMI is probably the most widely understood and known approach for looking at the improvement of software quality. A lot of 25,000 is not as known as much as CMMI. Nevertheless, an organization that is really looking to get the best out of it has to combine both, right? So if you look at if you look at it, an organization that wants to increase the quality of the software work that they do internally will be interested more in CMMI. But if you've got stakeholders and regulators who want to have comfort with regards to the quality of software that is being developed internally, then you might be considering ISO 25000. The best of both worlds, the organizations that look to achieve both. They look to achieve assessments from CMMI perspective, and also to ensure that they achieve ISO 25000, either in full or in part. Okay? So what is CMMI? I'm going to go focus on that. Capability maturity model integration. It's a collection of best practice. There are 22 core process areas involved. And primarily what it does is that it allows you to look at 22 process areas, to look at how your software work is being done and how it's being improved upon. So we're going to look at these 22 areas in a short while, and we're going to go through all of them. There are 3 different documents when it comes to CMMI. So there's what we call CMMI for development, CMMI for acquisition, and CMMI for services. The focus of today is on CMMI for development. That's what it is that we're going to be focusing on today. And as I said, it's best practice. It's a set of guidelines for ensuring that we can develop better products and services from a software perspective. All right. So what a lot of people know about CMMI is this table. People talk about initial, managed, defined, quantitatively managed, and optimizing. So there are 2 ways to it, and this is very critical and important because it depends on how the CMMI work for an organization is being done. That is what determines how each of this is being used. For organizations that are interested in putting something on their brand, on letting the entire world know the level of their maturity with regards to their software development, they use the stage representation. They are the ones that do initial, managed, defined, quantitatively managed, and optimizing. While organizations that are more interested in improving the quality of their software work, but primarily doing it from an internal perspective, they are the ones we call continuous representation, and they are the ones that we look at capability level. So it's more like to provide guidance to external people, you need to follow the stage representation. While if the objective is to do it internally within the organization, then you need to follow the continuous representation. This is very important because you see people misinterpreting and using these 2 approaches wrongly. So when people are referring to, people think that capability levels and maturity levels mean the same thing, but they don't. So when we're looking at maturity, we're looking at it's a culmination or a combination of maturity levels that give you of capability levels that give you a maturity level. So let me say that again. When we're looking at a maturity level, it's a combination of capability levels that give that to you. You can isolate processes, right, and practice areas and look at their capabilities, but when we say you're mature, we're looking at a combination of things. I'll go further into that as we go on. So understanding capability levels, as I said, it's for continuous representation, okay, and it really looks at it primarily from an internal perspective. So you look at it, it starts from incomplete, performed, managed, defined, quantitatively managed, and optimized. So this is what we mean by capability levels. While for maturity level, we're talking about initial, managed, defined, quantitatively measured. So the maturity in itself consists of related specific and generic practices for predefined set of process areas. I will explain that further. That improve the organization's overall performance. So we can look at an organization and say they're at maturity level 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. But we can look at specific process areas within an organization and say that they're at a certain capability level. So if we look at the company and we say the name of the company is Orlando Incorporated, we can say Orlando Incorporated is at software development maturity level 2 or level 3 as an organization. But within Orlando Incorporated, we can say that they have capability level of 1 or 2 or 3 with regards to requirements management or with regards to actual application development. I hope that is clear. All right. So the way the documents are structured is on this slide. So you have a process area. For that process area, you can have a maturity level. Then you have what we call specific goals, specific practices, example work products, sub practices. So the guidelines are available on the software on the SCIE website. A lot of all this information is freely available information. So I enjoin all of you to go in there and download copies of this document so that you can see how the document has been structured clearly, and I'll refer to that. At the beginning of the document, it talks about generic practices and process areas. And the generic practices and process areas are looking at issues of institutionalization. We say that how do we bring this into the fabric of the organization? How do we ensure that quality management with regards to software development runs deep within an organization? So we bring up this concept of institutionalization. So they've given some generic guidelines that talk about how generic goals and generic practices can be documented. But the most important part of the entire thing is this slide. So if you haven't heard anything that I've said, if you've forgotten everything that I've said today, you should remember this particular slide that talks about the 22 process areas broken into 4 categories. The 4 categories are process management, project management, engineering, and support. Right? So these are the areas by categories, and there are 22 process areas in themselves, and we're looking at 4 categories. Now I'm going to quickly go through these 22 process areas and these 4 categories over the next couple of minutes. Okay. So the first process area under the process category talks about organizational process definition, and this is a bit strange for some organizations, but it's not for the companies that have already adopted ISO 9001. So if an organization has already started doing a lot of process improvement work, this is quite straightforward for them to achieve. But if a business does not have a process improvement unit, or have not yet embarked on an ISO 9001 project, then it's difficult for them to actually say this is how the processes within our organization are defined, either defined by business units or departments or sub-units within departments. So these are things that you need to take into consideration. CMMI says that this is the real beginning. A business needs to have clearly defined business processes, because we're going to leverage those business processes in developing software. Number 2 is to then say that what exactly are the organizational process focus areas for an organization. So we say each of these documents are broken into specific goals and specific practices. I didn't want to fill this slide up with too much information. That's why I've limited it to this. Okay, all right. So if you look in here, as I said, despite the fact that you've got to have loads of processes as an organization, you also have to have process areas. Okay, so you've got to have your focus, and your focus can be lean manufacturing, it can be lean production, it can be improvement in distribution and logistics processes. It can be any of those areas, right? So it's important to really understand how this organizational process focus, how he addresses the issues and the assets in an organization. So that's the fact that you've got generic processes, as I described in the slide before now. You should then also have your key focus areas. The next one is what we refer to as organizational performance management. Once again, a business has got to be clear with regards to performance management. How do you measure performance? Have you adopted the methodology like balance scorecard to measure performance within the business? How do you define KPIs and CSFs and things like that? So for businesses that are not very big on process improvement, they find some of these areas rather strange because they're thinking, how does this affect us? But indeed, it actually does affect an organization and is also very important. Okay? So performance management, as I said, it's about how do we measure whether our processes themselves are performing well. What exactly are the KPIs that we've defined for each of those process areas? Okay. So apart from the performance management for the organization, we also can look at the performance management for a process. Okay. So process performance management is also very key, and that is slightly different from when we're looking at the organizational performance management. In this instance, we're now looking at the performance management with regards to specific processes. So it can be inventory process, it can be acquisition process, it can be anything at all. Okay? Yeah. Okay, I'll move on to the next one, which is training. So training is very important and is essential within the business. CMMI assumes that the level of maturity of the staff who end up doing software development.
I'm sorry for interrupting again, Orlando. Can you please make it the full screen?
Yeah. Okay, I'll make it a full screen in a second. 1 second, please.
Yes, sure.
Are we good? Okay. Are we good?
Yes, this is good. Yes, thank you.
Are you good? So, as I said, with regards to organizational training, the assumption is how effective the general training capabilities for the organization is it reflects directly on how the training for the development team is done. So training is extremely essential with regards to software development. You also see somewhere later where it says that how do we measure the capabilities of the staff who actually do the development. So it starts from the organizational training. So the assumption is if an organization does not invest in training, then typically they will not invest in the training of their software developers. This just is directly proportional. So these areas are very important from an organizational perspective. If an organization does not put together any kind of budget towards training, then you can imagine that the software development team will also not be trained at all because they are a part of the organization. So training is essential. So when we go and we try to look at how mature the software development capability of an organization is, a huge part of it is directly reflected from how well the organization trained its staff. I'll quickly move on. Right? Then we move on to the next area. So remember that I started with this slide that says that we will look at them in categories. And category number 1 is process management. So I've looked at 5 different process areas under process management. So I'm going to move to the next area or to the next category, which is project management. And project management, some organizations understand it to an extent. Some organizations are extremely poor around project management. But under project management, we're going to be looking at these 7 process areas under project management. Okay? So we assume that organizations who do project management have either adopted the project management book of knowledge, which is the PM book, or they've adopted Prince 2, and those 2 are definitely the most known project management methodologies. So it's an assumption that an organization has adopted either of those project management areas. So we're going to look at these 7 process areas quickly, right? So integrated project management. So all this is saying is that how well is the organization as a business? You know, you can have 2 types of PMOs. You can have what we call the strategic PMO, and we can have what we call, like, say, a departmental PMO, like an IT PMO. So this is really saying that what is project management in this organization? There's a question I always ask, well, my clients when I go to their office. I say, what is the definition of a project in this organization? So when I ask that question, people start to give me the definition of a project as said in the Prince 2 book or in the PM book guide. But that's not my question. My question is, what is the definition of project management in your own organization? So you've got to say a project is something that takes X number of hours, that must be delivered by this criteria. That is when it becomes a project. So indeed, you should have, a business is meant to have some kind of integrated project management methodology. You're not meant to be the HR department, the supply chain department, the IT department. No, all of them are not meant to adopt different project management methodologies. In a business, in an organization, they should have one adopted project management methodology in that organization. That is what this is saying. Now, what is the definition of a project within a certain business? Okay. Then I'm going to go to project monitoring and control. Some organizations, once again, they do well from a monitoring perspective. So it also depends on the maturity of their PMO, the project management office. For some organizations, the project management office is a mature project management office. So it does beyond just monitoring and control. For some organizations, they start out just monitoring other projects and controlling them, not really having any direct impact on how those other projects are done or carried out in those organizations. So project management and control is key, and is usually driven out of the project management office. If you have a software development team, one of the things you need to consider is how are the software projects being delivered. One of the things I said at the beginning of this webinar is the idea behind this is to how we deliver better software projects and better software. So monitoring software projects and using platforms that allow you to do application lifecycle management is very important and is essential. Project planning. So how do you do your scheduling? How do you do the planning? What tools and approaches do you use as a business? In assessing how well you do software development, planning is key. So if I come to an organization and I'm doing a review of their software development capabilities, I'm going to be looking at how well they do their planning. What are the softwares, what are the approaches that they do their planning? A lot of organizations have adopted agile planning approaches, for example, Scrum in doing this, and this is changing by the day. Some people also use different types of software to do their planning and use Gantt charts and things like that. So we're going to be looking at the level of maturity of your planning process. Then this is extremely important because it talks about the quantitative project management. Everything in CMMI talks about quantitative measurement. So these are not the days of qualitative measurement. This is not about high, medium, or low. This is about being able to say something is a 10%, is a 20%, is a 30, 40, or 50%. It's about quantitative measurement. So if we say a project is going well, we've got to be able to define well in very quantitative measures. Okay, so if we say a project is excellent, then we've got to be able to say what does excellence mean in quantitative measures. So this is also essential as part of the CMMI work. Then we move to requirements management. Once again, I'm going to back up in a second, and I'm going to back up to this slide. Okay, so I'm still here. I'm going to look at the remaining 3, which is requirements management, risk management, and supplier management. These 3 are all captured under project management. And if you're familiar with project management body of knowledge, PMBOK, you know that PMBOK talks about a risk management area. You know that it also talks about a procurement area, which is very much aligned to the supplier agreement area as it is. So back to requirements management. Now, it's good for you to refer. There's a methodology called the business analysis body of knowledge. It's called BABOK. So people who do requirements management need to refer to that document. because it's probably the de facto document when it comes to business analysis. So it goes beyond just requirements management. Makes the assumption that requirements are iterative. That's number one. And number two, that they're in some kind of cycle. That means the requirement management process is continuous. It doesn't necessarily end. You know, you gather requirements and you keep gathering it literally, especially changing requirements in changing businesses, literally till the end of the project. So a business needs to take this into consideration, and that is why a lot of people also combine a lot of this work with agile approaches, because you consistently need to understand that requirements are updated throughout the life cycle of a project typically. And then, of course, you need to work on things like understanding of requirements with all the stakeholders, commitment of all the stakeholders with regards to the requirements that are being gathered and how they are being managed. So this is different from when we talk about requirements gathering, but this is the entire life cycle of managing requirements in itself. Risk is key. So nobody that does software development that should not be worried about risk management. You should be significantly, extremely worried about risk. How well you can anticipate and manage risks with regards to software development is very important. So also with regards to risk, you have to be able to do it in both quantitative and qualitative approaches. But our real concern when it comes to CMMI is really around quantitative measurement. So risk is key. You have risk within security, you have risk in literally in every area of work. So within a software development project, you need to be able to think about the risk, you need to be able to anticipate them well ahead of time, and you need to be able to plan and manage these risks adequately. The final one under the project management category is the supplier agreement. So people who do a lot of ITIL work call this SLA, right? People who do ISO 20000 call this the service level agreement. But under CMMI, it's simply just known as the supplier agreement management, which says that if you have agreements with your suppliers, how do you manage that? How do you work with your suppliers in such a way that you can guarantee the quality of products and services that they will be delivering? So this is important, and this is essential that you're certain in terms of what the suppliers will be delivering on a software development project in itself. So supplier agreement management, and how do you monitor the supplier agreement? So this is key.
I'm sorry, I apologize. It seems Mr. Orlando is having internet connection problems. He appears to be offline, so we will wait a second until he gets back and he will continue where he's left. Thank you for your patience. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them or write them in the question box, and we will answer to them at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Orlando. You can continue.
Oh, all right, that's fine. So, okay, I'll quickly move on. So this we get to a bit of the technical side of the work. So once again, I'm going to back up quickly. So now we've moved from process management. We're done with process management. We've moved to project management. We're done with project management. Now we're going to go to the core software development. So the people that are developers on this will find this very interesting because it talks about these 5 areas. Product integration, where we're talking about how we integrate different applications or different subsystems and different modules together. Requirements development, which talks about part of the elicitation process in terms of gathering requirements. So this is different from the requirements management that we looked at under project management. Then we're looking at the technical solution. How do you actually build and develop the applications? What tools do you use and how do you approach that? Then the CMMI makes a clear differentiation between what is validation and what is verification. Okay, so we're going to look at that. A lot of people mix these two things together. When we say a software has been validated in terms of its working, and when we say it's been verified, it's working the way the users and the owners want it done. Because software can work and it can still be rejected by the stakeholders. So these are the 5 areas that come under the engineering category, and I'll quickly look at these areas. So first and foremost, we look at product integration. So this is a big challenge for a lot of organizations. They don't have, a lot of people don't use an enterprise service bus. They don't have predefined approaches by which they integrate different applications. the predefined ways by which they write and develop web services and how this works. So this is a challenge for a lot of organizations, and we're coming to check the maturity level of your development process in an organization. We've got to look at how you do your product integration, how you integrate to external systems, external websites, external applications. So this is essential. Do you have specifications for interface development? Okay, specifications for components, how components evolve. So the people who have adopted service-oriented architecture and enterprise service bus, they really should not have a problem with this, because usually a lot of these things are put in place with regards in when you're doing that. So requirements development is really saying that, did you really understand what it is that the client asked for? There is a diagram that everybody is always showing when they talk about this, that talks about, did you understand the requirements and how did you end up representing the requirements? So this is essential. The requirements development is really key in terms of, did you really understand what it is that the client wanted? The software might be working, but might not be verified by the users. So I've worked on a lot of projects where the software was done, but the users still rejected it. So it's important that you understand what the customer really wants.